Good afternoon and welcome to Inside Entrepreneurship, a webinar series hosted by the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative, the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Alliance, and the Georgetown University Alumni Association. Thank you for taking time out of your day to connect virtually with fellow Hoyas for today's conversation, Social Justice and Purposeful Leadership, with Troye Bullock, Darius Baxter, and Daniel Wright, co-founders of Good Projects, and Jeff Reid. Our host, Jeff Reid, is the founding director of the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative and professor of entrepreneurship at the McDonough School of Business. As Georgetown's entrepreneurship programs have grown under Reid's leadership, the school has been ranked among the best in the world for entrepreneurship by the Financial Times, Bloomberg Businessweek, and others. Reid is a catalyst for entrepreneurship and economic development and a well-known leader in entrepreneurship education. I'm Kelly Young, Associate Director of Strategic Engagement in Alumni Relations, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few tips and reminders. This conversation is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel. You will receive the link in a follow-up email. Jeff and our guests will take questions at the end of their discussion. Please send in your questions as you have them using the questions section of the webinar control panel. If you're having any technical difficulties or other issues, please submit those concerns via the questions section of the control panel as well. Without any further ado, I'm pleased to turn things over to Jeff.
Thank you, Kelly. Excited to be here for another episode of our Inside Entrepreneurship webinar series. I do want to just thank again our panelists today, but also our partners here, the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative and the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Alliance. We're working together to create one big community around entrepreneurship for Georgetown. With that, we're going to dive in and hear from today's speakers. And let me go to where I can, while I figure out how to remove, to stop sharing my screen here, I'm going to go ahead and ask our panelists here. So Troye, Darius, Danny, I've known you guys for several years. You're doing amazing work. Can you give us a little bit of background on how you came to Georgetown and then how Good Projects got started?
Yeah, I'll speak on behalf of myself just in regards to how I got to Georgetown, even though we all kind of came to Georgetown the same way. We all actually grew up in Washington, D.C., and I'll speak for the other two. We used to go shopping in Georgetown, but never really knew where the school was. We played football, and we actually played against each other in high school through the WCAC League in the Washington, D.C. area. We all got recruited to go to Georgetown to play football, and that's where we met. And, you know, being as though we played against each other, we knew of each other, we became good friends, lived together throughout our time at Georgetown. But through that experience and living with each other, we realized that we had, you know, similar things in common other than playing football and being from DC, and that was being raised in communities that were underserved in Washington, DC, communities that were deemed hopeless, violent, and impoverished. And we didn't see many others like that at Georgetown, and that's what brought us together. And that's what motivated us to do something else, and out came Good Projects. I'll let one of the other guys come take from there.
Sure, Darius, tell us about how you got to Georgetown and got to know these other two guys.
Yeah. Hey everybody, name is Darius Baxter, Georgetown class of 2015. Ended up at Georgetown like by way of the same guys, but same way the guys did. Was really passionate about sports. Still really passionate about sports. I had an opportunity when coaches came and knocking at my door. You know, Georgetown for me never even seemed like an option, to be honest. Like I was always have been smart, you know, but to be able to go to the hometown school, particularly a school like Georgetown, didn't seem that way. But then had the opportunity, got recruited, had a couple other offers, but at the end of the day, to be able to play before the hometown crowd, family still get to came to the games. I mean, it's a childhood dream, you know, get to grow up watching the legacy of guys like Allen Iverson and Patrick Ewing. I wasn't as good in basketball as I thought I was, you know, but, you know, to be able to rock that blue and gray, it was a lot of pride. So, but yeah, I say sports was my avenue, but my brains kept me there.
That's great. Danny.
Yeah, my story isn't much different, Jeff. It's interesting being here from DC. I think a lot of us take for granted the influence that we have, on high school students when they're making that decision. If I wasn't from DC and didn't have so many people that love Georgetown in my ear, I probably wouldn't have went to Georgetown. But for the entire year of my senior year at St. John's, and just talking to people, family, friends, everyone's been like Georgetown, 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 like that. That really impacted my decision. And it's interesting because now when I look back and I talk to students now, high school students, or I'm put in contact with people that are wearing their options, I have to think back to those days to really understand the influence that I have as an alumni and being able to actually persuade people to come to our school. And it's interesting because even before I made that decision to come to Georgetown, I didn't really understand, the value of coming to a school or institution like this. And now that I do, I'm even more thrilled to share that experience with young high school, middle school students, and just tell them, that going to a school and an institution like Georgetown can change your life for sure.
Awesome. Well, so you guys came and you guys met, so you might have competed against each other in high school, but when you got to Georgetown, you were on the same team, playing football. And you mentioned the talking to high school kids. So you guys work a lot with young people in the neighborhoods like the ones you grew up in, right? And these are neighborhoods that a lot of Georgetown students or alumni may not spend a lot of time in. Can you tell us what it's like there, and what does Good Projects do, and kind of how you guys got started as an organization? I know you guys aren't shy. You can jump in, whoever wants to go first.
Zoom is different than like being in person. You kind of know, like, we really like the hand raising option. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that came today. Obviously, there's 50 million things you can be doing at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday. Everybody, even through COVID, is like super busy. So thanks for thinking enough of us and the program to take some time and kind of listen to what we have to say. But it's important, in this conversation, you asked the question, Jeff, about the communities that we work in. And it's like special in this moment in time as we're going through COVID. And I think for the first time, people that didn't traditionally experience what it meant to like not have, like whether that's food, resources, like opportunity, are now experiencing that in this moment. But we work with a population that lives in Southwest Washington, D.C. People don't realize this as they're driving like to National Stadium or going down to the wharf. You're only a few steps away from the largest density of housing projects in Washington, D.C. You have several hundred families that are living right next to each other, spread out across about 20, 25 acres. And, it's easy to like have a preconceived notion of what poverty looks like. But in this case, I guarantee you, everybody that's listening to this call, if you've been to DC or you're living in DC now, has driven through Southwest, and you had absolutely no idea that you were in the middle of that. DC does a great job of keeping things clean on the outside, but it's really when you pull back that layer, you realize like, wow, there's a lot going on here. Just yesterday, there was a shooting in the neighborhood. A 14-year-old was shot on a tennis court, and that happens all around the city. Southwest is a perfect example of that. We deal with everything from, violence in the community, but there's a lot of threats that people aren't even thinking about. Right now we just completed our housing assessments on the families in our program, and there's mold in almost every single unit for the families that we work with. That may seem like a small thing, but imagine being a child and trying to worry about, first you're hungry, then you're having to deal with violence, and then your brain can't even properly develop because there's traces of lead in your water and you're inhaling mold every single day. To list everything that our families go through in any given day, we'd be here for an hour and a half. But it's just more than anything, I guess a long way of answering your question is just to say, like, for anybody that's on this call, I'd say just appreciate the privilege that you have in any given day. Just really appreciate it. Like, I was joking before we hopped on this call talking to one of our staff members. Like, it brings me, like, I get paid to do this. Like, no joke. Like, I get paid to do this. Like, I get a check every 2 weeks, like everybody else's job, to like try to find ways to help people that are living in poverty. Like, and that brings me joy. but it brings me no joy sitting thinking about the things that they have to deal with in any given day. And literally, it can change on any given day. In this case, they're dealing with a pandemic while also dealing with the effects of poverty. So the community, but at the same time, the community is very vibrant. You have community leaders, you have people that do art, you have a strong support system and a network where we saw the second COVID hit, the resident council presidents jumped into action and they were giving out food to everybody every day, like good meals, with the support of a lot of different groups. It's a vibrant community. I invite everybody to come and visit us.
Well, so you guys grew up in some environments where I think you've told me before that most of the people you knew that got out, that got to go to college somewhere, didn't come back, right? People that got out generally weren't going to come back, and each of you made a decision that that's not the way you wanted to live, right? You decided you wanted to get back, and that's how Good Projects got started. Can you kind of give our audience a little bit of the history of, what was the original idea and what were some of the first steps you took when you started this organization?
I'm gonna be very honest and transparent with you, Jeff. I think the story has been mistold. I don't want people to think that I'm just like this saint that was like, oh, I'm trying to, help people, because like the rest of you and like the best of them, I was like, man, I need to get me a good job, make some good money. And it just happened that, when you're passionate about something, things just, it's weird how the universe works. It's like alignment just kind of forms. And so for us, when we decided to start our organizations, it came organically from conversations with mentors, that recognized the passion that we had and helped us channel that energy towards something that became amazing, and what we have in Good Projects. And so originally when we started our organizations, we just wanted to solve a problem. We recognize that here in the nation's capital, despite how beautiful it is, despite the median household income compared to everywhere else in the country, like there's still so much violence and poverty that's right here in the nation's capital. And for us to grow up here, go to college here, and to just turn a blind eye to that just seemed wrong. And so, initially when we started Good Projects, we were just trying to host a summer camp to get kids off the street, because we understood that gun violence spikes during the summer every single year in June and July. And so we, having the resources that we have and being a part of sports and understanding how sports really helped us capitalize and get more opportunities, we wanted to bring that to the communities that we come from. And, it started with the camp. Things turned out well and we ran with it. I'll let one of the two of them pick up a little bit more, but it just happened very organically, and you can never underestimate how much a passion can drive you forward.
Well, you guys were still in school and you spent a summer running a camp, right? That's how it got started. Yeah. Troye, tell us about the first summer.
The startup Hoyas program while we were doing the camp.
That's right. That's when I first met you guys. You went through our summer incubator program that year. And I remember you guys were working your tails off, and we'd see you in the incubator program while you were trying to build an organization. But you were also running around with like hundreds of kids, I think, and a lot of them were coming to the campus at Georgetown, and you had them in other neighborhoods and things like that. So maybe give us a little more color into what was that summer like, and then how did that turn into something that has grown bigger since then?
Man, the first summer was something else, Jeff. I can't even lie. I think the camp may have started 3 or 4 weeks after we graduated. So, as Danny said, we wanted to be successful. Like, we came from the communities that we serve. We experienced, the injustice, and we wanted to get out. But when we realized what we had to do, we let all of that go. And we said, we're not going to take the jobs. We're going to do this thing and this one thing only. And that one thing was the camp. So, the camp, we graduated, we didn't have, places to live. We said, we're going to do the incubator program. We're going to do this camp, and that's going to be it. And, we would have been excited, Jeff, if 30, 40, 50 kids showed up for our first program for, our organization that we just started, 2 months ago. But, we hit the streets, Jeff, and handed out flyers, talked to parents, grandparents. And on that first day, 200 kids showed up to this camp. And we are just like, wow, what are we going to do with 200 kids for 5 weeks? We're 21, we're just getting started. We don't have much experience. But it ended up being an amazing program because, we were able to leverage the networking, and something that Coach Rob Scarlatta told us, through Georgetown football, is that 4 for 40 mantra, and that networking, using that network to create partnerships. So we had over 30 partnerships, which served the kids for the summer for 5 weeks. And, when we looked at the data and we looked at the goal, as Danny mentioned, the goal was to lower gun violence, in that neighborhood. And we looked at the data from Metropolitan Police Department, and there were 0 gun-related crimes in the neighborhood that we did the camp. So we looked back at the camp, and our first program was an extreme success. It did exactly what we wanted it to do. And from there, we were like, what's next, right? Like, we put all our eggs in one basket to do the camp. And, it was a blessing that, the city was launching a new initiative to really change what the juvenile system was going to be through a mentorship program. And, it aligned directly with what we had done, working with the young kids and working with kids who are extremely at risk to gun violence. So we applied to that. And, again, it was a situation where we would have been blessed to win it, because many of the organizations who are applying have been doing juvenile work for 20 years. And here we are, not even, 6 months in existence, applying for this, DC grant, like big grant, for about like $300,000. And, we ended up getting it, and it was just an amazing start, and we learned a lot from the business school, and, we kind of took it from there. And I'll let Darius kind of keep it going.
So that was your early funding, was some
Yeah.
from the city, right? One of our audience members had asked about how the money came in early on. And so that really helped turn it into something that you knew might last beyond that first summer.
Yeah. So like, what I'll say is, and especially for nonprofits and social impact organizations, what we did was we used those partners, and we used, free space and, in-kind donations to get outcomes, in which we use those outcomes and that data. And now we have experience to then, apply for funds. And that's kind of how we went about it.
It's interesting, Jeff. The story always sounds so good when we tell it, but that first summer was hard. Like, if no one else wants to say it, that first summer was a struggle. Imagine for so long in your life, there's always someone that you kind of report to, or that, at least from our standpoint, being 21, 22, and then out of nowhere, like, when counselors, staff, kids, parents have questions, it's like, no, you're the boss. Like, you need to make the decision, right? So doing that for the first time with 200 kids and dealing with all those dynamics, and then also, hiking it over back to Georgetown at the end of the camp day, at 1, 2 o'clock, and, working on our MVP was rough, because we also it wasn't just, oh, we're going to do this nonprofit, but I don't know if you remember, but we were also doing a partners as well, trying to figure out how to build a for-profit model as well, right? And I think that's really where passion, kind of catapults you a little bit further. And that's why we see, like, the millennial and now, like, the Gen Z generations, our generations are pushing the boundaries so much more, because when you're at that age, you don't have as much to lose. When I look back, I don't know if I could have that exact same summer right now at 27, right? And I think that makes a big difference when you're an entrepreneur, right? It's like, really, what is your bandwidth and your capacity to sacrifice, to take risks, right? And as you get older, you have so many other factors that you have to consider when dealing with entrepreneurship, or when trying to help someone else. Really, it doesn't even have to be entrepreneurship, but this conversation is about social justice, and it's about, equity and creating an environment where you help other people, right? And even from that same standpoint, so many of us have so much going on in our lives that it reduces our capacity to do for other people, right? And if we took that same mindset that younger people have in relation to trying to do new initiatives, trying to do new projects, or organizing and activating, if we took that same mentality, despite everything else we have going on, it would allow us to push a lot further as a people, to see our common humanity and to really help one another and build the world that we ideally all want to see.
So you think, so the passion you guys had, right? So you guys didn't study business, right? You didn't know you were going to launch this organization, but the energy, enthusiasm, and passion you had got you through those early days and continues, right? I mean, maybe now it's a little different than when you were right out of college, but you still, you saw a problem that you wanted to solve, and that's what you've been after. Maybe I'll ask to fast forward a little bit and talk about what the organization has become now, right? You guys have several people working for you. You've got a variety of projects. I know Darius talked about the one neighborhood in Southwest DC that's a focus. Can you guys give us an idea? Maybe Darius, you can kick this off. You know, what is the organization's focus now? And then, yeah, I'll ask that, and then maybe we can talk about the Purpose Tour coming up right after that.
So just looking at the guys just talked about kind of that experience through that first summer, Jeff. And it was really looking at when we first started, how do we just have the greatest amount of impact? So we just sprinted out and tried to do anything and everything. And by the grace of God, through supporters like the people that are watching this video call right now, we were able to do a lot of that stuff. We were doing camps, you know, we started a trash company, and we're hiring kids that have been formerly incarcerated. We're going into prisons working. We're doing school programs. Like talk about couldn't do that summer again. Like, I don't know where that energy came from to be doing all of that stuff. Like, you know, it's passion, really is passion. But it wasn't a lack of energy that made us really want to focus. It was saying, all right, we look at our balance sheet at the end of the year, and we've spent, let's call it $1 million on programming. Yeah, we can point to touch points and say, all right, we've had success here, we've sent kids to college there, you know, recidivism is down here, but it's all over the place. And the great thing about being young is that you can be audacious. You know, who's going to tell you otherwise? It's not like we're 60 talking about we're going to change the world. You know, nothing wrong with being 60. If there's any 60-year-olds on this call, you know, shout out to you. You can change the world too. You know, but for us, it was like, man, like poverty, huge issue. Oh, poverty, you know, nobody's really been able to fix that at scale. Poverty, the root cause of all of these other small things, big things, but other things that we're trying to focus on. What would it look like if we tried to, you know, end poverty? and we had this conversation with a few different people. And, you know, like, here's the great thing about having people around you that love and support you is that even when you have wonky, crazy ideas, oftentimes they'll tell you to go for them. So here we were like, yeah, like, let's try to do it. What might it look like for us to create that model? Luckily, we had a funder in the Ford Foundation that had been giving us like $100,000 a year. And they were like, here's some support. We'll send our consultants down to work with you guys. Let's really dive into what that model could look like. And we just kept on these conversations for about a year until we finally got to a point where we were confident to launch what is now the Good Zones Initiative. And it's like, when I'm telling you, when you can have a great idea, you can have all the plans in the world, but I think it was Mike Tyson that said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Like, we've been punched in the face over and over and over and over again. Like, we use this term analogy that we're in the fight with our families. Like, we're not in a fight like with them, like we're fighting against each other. Like, we're in the fight, like it takes a whole community of people like throwing fists at poverty to even try to like get it to budge a little bit, you know. So that's where we are right now, and just trying to tackle it from a number of different places. You know, and I mentioned earlier, every family that we work with has a different set of issues that they're faced with. Some of them, their house isn't stable. Some of them have never worked in their entire life and have been on this government assistance since they were little kids. That's all they've ever known. Some of them, their mindsets are completely shot. And that's the work that we have to do, is just trying to unlearn like all of that. Like, we talk about deficit mindsets versus growth mindsets. It's just like, I don't know, like the world that we live in as people that have working internet and air conditioning to be able to sit and enjoy even this is a completely different world than the families that we work with are living in. And we have this, it's Plato's allegory of the cave, if anybody's ever had an opportunity to explore that. It talks about these characters that, break free and are able to see this beautiful world, and then are trying to go back and convince everybody that's chained up to come and explore it with them. And that's what we're constantly facing every single day.
So you guys your goal is to solve poverty at scale, and you're focusing on one particular neighborhood now. You're basically saying, we're going to work with the families in this neighborhood in Southwest DC, and we're going to provide a holistic solution, right? You're thinking about healthcare, you're thinking about housing, you're thinking about education, a whole variety of things. And your goal is to have some impact there that's measurable, and then you can expand, right? You're going to learn from this experience over a multi-year period and then grow. Is that fair? Fair way to say?
But not just us though, Jeff. The hope is that everybody can learn from it. We're in a position that we've dedicated our lives to this work, mentoring young people, working in schools, feeding people. But not to say that you have to dedicate your life to doing that, but everybody has time in any given day that they can be working towards this issue. Pick one thing that we're doing, take even 1% of one thing that we're doing and try to implement that into your own life. Like outside of what we do in our day-to-day with good, we're still neighbors, we're still brothers, we're still sons. Like it goes well beyond what we do in Southwest. Like I have a community garden in my backyard here. That isn't something that I have to do for good, but the people next door come and they get the little kids come and grab the tomatoes off the vines. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to be the executive director of a nonprofit to do that. The same way people on this call you don't have to look to us and be like, oh, like let me get my joy through what they're doing. Like, no, you can do something in your own life. Like the biggest threat that we face as a society, particularly in this moment during Black Lives Matter, isn't racism, it's not violence, it's apathy. It's for the 30 people that are on this call to think that it's okay to just have sat here for an hour and be like, okay, I did something today because I listened to how bad the world is. Like, no, you have to take what you may have heard from this call, maybe something inspires you to want to go and make a difference in your neighborhood, in your community, to somebody in your family.
Well, why don't we pick up on that? There's so things have changed in the last couple of months. The world has started to pay a little more attention to some of the issues that you guys have been working on. Can you talk about what's happened with good over the last 2 months since the kind of the George Floyd and other incidents have changed the conversation? Kind of what has good done in the last few months? Troye, why don't you tell us what's been going on lately?
Yeah, I mean, when the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor first happened, we saw it on the news as everybody did, and it became this big thing. And as individuals, we went out to the protests in DC, we experienced what many protesters experienced, and getting tear gassed and beaten and bum rushed by police officers. And then we went back home and we looked at the news again, and we saw that the news was portraying, the actions of protesters like us as negative, looting, rioting, bad. So we had to take a deep look in the mirror and say, hey, what are we going to do? Like, what is good going to do at this pivotal time in history to change the narrative of these protests, change the narrative of this movement? Where do we fit into this? So we decided to have a purpose party, something that we called a purpose party. And it coincidentally, the mayor of DC had just got Black Lives Matter painted down by the White House about a day before, we decided to host this purpose party. And the meaning behind the purpose party is that we wanted to change the narrative by bringing joy, happiness, dancing, laughter, food, drinks to the protests, to create a bigger meaning behind this party and change the narrative from being negative. So we went out, threw about 1,000 hot dogs on the grill down at Black Lives Matter Plaza, had like 5 DJs flying down the street. And what we saw when we got there was, kind of a festival type vibe. People just walking around, a few protesters by the gate. And within about an hour and a half, Jeff. When we had the DJs going, got the food going, there was over 10,000 people down on Black Lives Matter Plaza, literally partying with the purpose with us. The mayor came out to speak, and that event essentially became the launch pad for Black Lives Matter Plaza that weekend.
Yes,
you
Muriel
saw the
Bowser.
post in New York Times. It was crazy.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah, so when DC Mayor Muriel Bowser, she stood up and gave her speech to dedicate Black Lives Matter Plaza, and that made the national news. She was using your PA system. She was using the microphone. If you look closely at those images, the three of you guys are standing right there in front of her.
She got up, she took our mic, she stood on our speaker. She actually, we helped her up on the speaker that our DJ brought, and she just stood on the speaker and gave the speech.
And that was a result of you seeing an opportunity to take this moment and do some positive things, so that it wouldn't be, the stories that you had seen weren't what you thought was the right story. So if you turned it into a positive message, and then you guys went beyond that, right? So after the purpose party turned into a purpose tour, and tell us what that was all about.
Purpose
Maybe
tour.
Danny, I'll ask you to tell us about that one.
I would say that Darius is probably more appropriate to talk about that.
All right, Darius, tell us what the purpose tour was.
Hey guys, the purpose tour, man, was an extension of what Troye just shared. Like when you go through an experience like we did with the purpose party, to be honest with you, like it's very easy. And we were joking for everybody. We were joking with Jeff before he came back on. Mind you, this is the only time that I'm taller than Jeff, so I'm very proud of this. I purposely adjusted my chair so that I would be sitting higher than you, Jeff. Like, nope. But so we went through the purpose party, and by every stretch of the imagination, amazing experience. You can just Google it and see like thousands of people out there. Wow, you look from every direction, you can't see nothing. To have an idea like that, God puts that in your heart. You put it into fruition, and it's like, yes, exactly where like you're supposed to be at the exact time, exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Yes. And almost immediately after that, we're all family here. I'll share. We go on vacation. We're like, oh my gosh, we ain't got no vacation. We took 3 days, and we're out sitting next to the lake, social distancing. And the TV just keeps flashing. Rayshard Brooks shot in Atlanta. Rayshard Brooks shot in Atlanta. And particularly after that amazing experience where we're able to change the narrative in front of the White House from rioting and looting to partying with a purpose, and everybody has joy and they're using that as a form of protest. To see what happens with Rayshard Brooks, not as the incident, but the response to that, where Martin Luther King talks about rioting as the language of the unheard. And people feel like the greatest response to a police-involved shooting of a Black man is to burn down the Wendy's in which the Black man was shot in. Didn't necessarily sit well with like what we were trying to do. Where if we can get into the details of it, I'll take 30 seconds there, but what we saw, Rayshard Brooks as an example of a national response to police-involved violence, where people were breaking into things and burning down things. There was never necessarily a consideration of how is this pushing the conversation forward? How is this positively affecting Black folk in this country? Because while this stuff is happening, I'm sitting talking to a business owner here in the neighborhood that I live in, and I'm having to talk him down because he's painted in big, bold letters in front of his shop. He owns a medical marijuana dispensary here in Northeast. He's wrote in big, bold letters, Black-owned business, Black-owned business, Black-owned business. And for 3 consecutive nights, people broke into his business. So let's take it back to Rayshard Brooks. Was there ever a consideration that this Wendy's is franchised possibly by a Black person, because we're here in Atlanta? So potentially, in our response to the shooting of Rayshard Brooks, we're actually pushing our race farther back. So while we were working out all of those nuances as a people, and we'll continue to work those out, the calling that was placed was to say, all right, you have to give people feel unheard right now. And writing as the language of the unheard, we have to give people an alternative. And at the same time, while we're providing that alternative, be constantly working with the resources and the opportunities that we've been provided through good to constantly create a better world so that people don't feel unheard, they don't feel unseen. When I saw yelling, when I saw screaming, when I saw fires, when I saw things getting burnt and broke down, that wasn't people saying, okay, this is how we feel change is going to happen. This was people saying, I'm tired of asking for change. I'm tired of demanding change and getting no response. So we're going to show our whole ass until somebody is willing to listen. But where have we seen the effectiveness? It's not necessarily when we show our ass, it's when we come together as a collective. And that is what we were seeing. People are.
All right.
What we were seeing was people in classes, and even in the midst of a global pandemic, coming together under one common cause. And we showed that when we do that, we can get Aunt Jemima taken off the bottle. We can piss Dan Snyder off. We don't have to ask no more for people to take down these racist statues. We can just take them down ourselves when we go in groups of 100 and 200. And there's something super powerful about that. And the hypothesis of the Purpose Tour was that what we saw in front of the White House wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't, okay, you set the speaker up once, you set some hot dogs, and it was just fluke that happened. The bet was, we're going to go out into the country. We're going to go to every single place. We're going to go to the South. We're going to go to the West. We're going to go to the Midwest, and we're going to bring it all the way back. And even in New York, the hottest crowd in the goddamn country, I'll admit. Anybody on here from New York, y'all a tough bunch. But we bet that through this, if we give people a different opportunity, a different way to protest, that they will take that. There's a group of people that took pride in taking people's anger in that moment and using it for something negative. And we saw that as well. People took pride in that. They took pride in being able to stand before crowds, get people riled up and then get them to go clash with police, or get them riled up and then get them to go break into a mall. There's no pride in that. There's no joy. That's not what MLK was doing. What they were doing was coming together as a group of people and saying that even when you hit us in the head, we're going to stay. You talk about John Lewis getting in good trouble. You can yell at us. You can scream at us. You can call us names. You can beat us. You can spray us with hoses. We're going to stay in line. We're going to keep marching forward. The symbolism in that, just continue to march forward. What we showed with the Purpose Tour was through the division, through the anger, through the hatred, through the you trying to put on television an officer sitting on the neck of a black man to break our spirits as black folk, that we're going to continue to dance. We're going to continue to sing. We're going to continue to praise. That nothing you do can break the joy of our people. Nothing. And we were proven correct. Like, oh my gosh, man.
So you guys got on a bus, right? So the tour was how many cities and how many days? And you guys met with people in a lot of places and spread this message of positive change. And you just got back to DC on what, the 4th of July? Is that right?
Yeah, Juneteenth to July 4th. Like, even the symbolism even there to be able to do that. We talk about July 4th as Independence Day, but knowing goodness damn well that all Americans were not freed on the 4th of July. Like Juneteenth, and we all learned a little bit about Juneteenth and what that meant to this country this year, myself included. Obviously I had heard it, never celebrated it, but we got to learn for the first time the importance and the significance of Juneteenth. And to be able to celebrate Juneteenth, particularly in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as we honor the lives that were lost at Greenwood Ave, but also celebrate what they were able to do and being able to create what we deem as like a Black Wall Street. But even that is a deficit mindset. Those people weren't comparing themselves to Wall Street. They created their own mecca of economic success in Tulsa, Oklahoma, despite what they were faced. So I don't call it Black Wall Street. Greenwood Ave, to be able to celebrate it there particularly on Juneteenth, was super powerful.
All right, so we only have a few more minutes left. I want to know and there's a question from our audience. It's a little bit along these lines. What's next for good partners and good projects? What are you guys aiming for in the near future?
I'll let you answer it, Danny.
What's next? I guess we're just pushing along with the plan to move 500 families in Southwest out of poverty. I think that, the circumstances of what's been going on the past few months in our country has shown that we can do more. And so for us, it's understanding that, one, we're trying to build a model to help people move out of poverty, but two, that we have a calling to use our voices, use our network, and use our influence to also, inspire people across the country and to help tell their stories and help lift their voices and help get people to, recognize the power they had. If we can hone in on a lot of the things that Darius just said, every single person on this call, every single person that engages with good as a whole, should be inspired to do more. Every single one of us has a gift. Every single one of us has a career field, or we're in an industry, or we have some type of passion that can be used to enhance the lives of someone else. And our jobs as social impact leaders, or nonprofit owners, whatever you want to call us, like, our job is to help continue to inspire people to do more, in addition to what our actual organizational goals are. Our job is to make sure that everyone understands they have a talent. One of the things that I've always used as an example, when I talk to people, is Tom Rafa, over at Rafa Accounting. He's an accountant by trade. He knew that he was good at numbers, at a very early age. And he says, hey, I'm an accountant, but how can I use this to help people all across the country, right? And he ended up having the largest social impact accounting firm in the country, providing hundreds of thousands of dollars in pro bono services to organizations like ours in need. And so, when we look at what the ultimate goal or foundation of good is, it isn't just what our mission is of moving 500 families out of poverty, but it's to say, how can we help everyone else that's in this call that engages with us, or hears our stories, or speaks to us? How can we help them leverage the passion, skills, and aptitudes they have to make this world the place that we all want to see it?
Awesome. Well, while we're let's see, I'm going to pull my screen back up here, and if I can find the right slide here while we're still talking here. Can you guys see the screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got your website up here.
Oh, no.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Everybody, the branding, man. The branding. We need that capital GOOD, man. After all this time.
That's right. Good is supposed to be capitals. Hey, why don't you tell everybody what good stands for? What do the letters stand for?
What is good? Good doesn't stand for anything in particular. Good stands for every single day we're challenging everybody to just wake up and do something good in their lives. We've tried a few different acronyms, like giving out opportunities daily, probably the closest thing it stands for, but I'm not gonna sit up here and lie and be like, we came up with it with some big acronym. It was not. Like, we just literally wanted to do good projects, and just try to change the world in that way.
Well, so if people want to help out and learn more about your organization, they can check it out at your website, goodprojects.org.
Or on Instagram, Good Projects DC.
Good Projects DC on Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram, Twitter.
And if you've enjoyed this story, or if you just enjoy hearing stories from Georgetown entrepreneurs, I encourage you to check out our Venture Forward podcast series. You can find it at the eship.georgetown.edu website. And the Good Partners guys have done one of our podcast episodes already a few months back, and there's a new episode that's going to drop soon to hear more about what they're up to lately and what's next. So please continue to engage with our entrepreneurship programs, and thank you guys for the work you're doing and being great examples of men and women for others, and keep making a difference in the world. thanks for being with us today. And thanks to our audience. Thanks to the Georgetown Alumni Association for helping put this together. Thanks, Darius. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for having us, Jeff. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate everybody.